Good morning, everyone. So today I'll be presenting MeterManager, our fleet management software. The MeterManager's primary purpose is to add a layer on top of Communicator, giving you the ability to manage multiple meters at once and keep a good idea of everything that's going on with your system. I'm one of the senior developers here at Electra Industries. I was the one who worked primarily on MeterManager, and I'll be showing you all the ins and outs of using it today. So, what is MeterManager? MeterManager allows you to see all of your meters in one place. Where Communicator, you connect to the meter, maybe you view some polling, some real-time readings, you can update the firmware, you can program a meter. You can only deal with one meter at a time. MeterManager allows you to deal with all of the meters in one place. Not only that, it also allows you to automate a lot of the tasks, a lot of the common tasks that are involved with a meter, including retrieving logs, detecting a meter, checking if it's online or offline, updating the meter time, and so on. Additionally, it also provides the ability to generate reports on top of the data and the logs that have been retrieved from those meters. So I'm going to be showing you some basic setup, how to connect to meters, how to find meters on your network, how to set up log retrieval, how to set up the time synchronization, a bunch of little ins and outs. And I'm also going to go over some of the little details, that allow you to really get into using the system. So the very first thing, this is MeterManager. This dashboard gives you access to all of your different meters. When you first start up MeterManager, the very first thing that comes up is the automatic scan configuration. This allows you to quickly set a range of IP addresses that MeterManager will, every couple hours, go out and scan to see if there's any meters. This range comes from the subnet of your local network card. But if you have a more fancy range, you can fancy range, maybe there's you have multiple subnets, or maybe a smaller range you want to set. You can set that elsewhere, and we'll go over that later in the session. Additionally, you can also turn on and off automatic log retrieval, right? It's defaulted to disabled. You just uncheck it. And once it's disabled, you can also set the default log retrieval schedule. Now, this schedule is defaulted to 12 hours. And this schedule is how often any newly created group will automatically retrieve logs. This can be set to anything, and it just happens to be the default, right? Once set, you can then go into the groups and override it for individual settings. We'll go over that when we get to configuring log retrieval. And then we also have this automatically assign new meters to groups based off of meter type. This allows you to easily drop your meters into groups, such as a Shark 250 group, a Shark 270 group, a Nexus 1450 group, a Nexus 1500 group, which allows them to automatically start retrieving without anything else being configured on your part. So after you set that up, the system will automatically start and will automatically go out and start searching for meters. But what if you don't set it up that way? What if you have a specific range that you've already set up Meter Manager, you've plugged in a whole bunch of meters. Now you want to go out and find those meters automatically. You don't know what the IP addresses are, but you know what subnet they are on. We have a tool under Utilities, Connection, Manual Network Scan, where you just specify your IP range. Now I'm going to just do a small range so it goes quickly. Okay. You specify the IP range. You specify the number of workers you have simultaneously, whether you do a ping or a TCP connect. Ping is faster, but if your network is blocking pings, it may not go through. You can switch to TCP connect, but that'll take longer because you have to wait for the connect to occur. And you just hit start, and it'll start scanning that whole range. And you can see here, all of those meters are starting to pop up. And we just wait a second because it's just pulling up some information from a couple of meters, which may just not be responding.
Luna, while we wait for that information to come up, we have a question from one of our attendees. Can we
Sure.
group different models of meters together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The default is to group them, to automatically assign them to similar meter types. That's just the automatic assignment, right? The system, when it detects meters through this automatic detection, it'll automatically put those meters in those groups. However, most customers just create their own groups, right? Whether it's by building, by state, by facility, whatever, right? And then they manually, and when once we get up to moving the meters around, we'll create the groups. We'll create a group, throw a couple meters in, and I'll show you how all that works.
Great, thank you.
So we have here our scan, we finished. And now when we go over here, you'll see a whole bunch of new meters in here, right? And you'll also notice that a bunch of these meters, the online status is dark blue, right? And in fact, some of the meters locally that we already had configured are dark blue because the connection got refreshed. This online status, we can see here live, this online status shows you how recently the status was updated. So now we have a bunch of meters in here, right? We have a bunch of meters in here, and let's say we want to set up a group for them. We go to add group. We get it, let's call it, I don't know, manufacturing 07, okay? We just give it a name, hit okay. And then we select the meters we want. Let's put this meter. We select the meter, we just right click it, move meter to group, manufacturing 7. Move meter to group. Move meter to group. Okay. So now they're moved to a group, right? And at any time, if you don't want them in that group, right, you can just move them to a different group, or you can move them to unassigned. Now, unassigned is a special group where the meters are not, nothing is done to the meters, right? They're not retrieved from, you don't get any of the automation features or the reporting. So it's a good place to stick meters that you want to keep in your system, but that you don't want to track, you don't want to retrieve from, you don't want to the system to be constantly monitoring and stuff like that, right? If a meter goes offline, you can stick it in the unassigned so it doesn't constantly warn you about the meter having gone offline and so on. Okay, so now that we've set up, that meter, right? What if you have you've hooked a meter up at a specific IP address, right? You don't want to go through the process of automatically detecting it and scanning through a range or anything. The simplest way to connect a single meter is to go to manual connect. And from here, you just type in the IP address. Okay. You just type in the IP address, all right, and hit connect. And it comes back with the meter, serial number, and the meter type. Now, this is a meter we already had assigned to a group, right here. But if it was a new meter, it would ask you, do you want to assign this to a group? And then you can assign it to a group, or you could switch it to another group from here. But what if you have a meter that's connected, say, to a different port? Now, Meter Manager, all of these automation tools, automatically tries to connect to port 502, which is your standard Modbus TCP port, right? So what if your Modbus TCP is on a different port, right? Maybe you're going through some sort of Ethernet to serial adapter. Maybe you just have port forwarding set up, right? From manual connect, you can also specify an alternate port like that, and that's it. But what if you have a serial port on your computer? We do support serial ports directly on your computer. From here, you can just select connection type, serial, manually connect your baud, your COM port, your protocol, your echo, and your address, and hit connect. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you because it doesn't have any serial port connections, but this would be how you did it. So now you have you've set up your connection, right? Now let's start setting up our automation. So for manufacturing 7, right? We have the system you can see here. It's automatically been set up, right? Remember, over in auto scan, we have every 12 hours. It's telling us it's automatically going to start retrieving at 12 in about 2 hours, right? Well, let's say that's not the schedule we want. We select the group, and we can either hit configure group or right click configure group. And now here we can configure everything about this group. All right. Retrieve logs is the primary one you're going to deal with. First thing is this checkbox here. This allows you to turn on and off retrieval of logs for this group. Some groups you may not want to automatically retrieve the logs. Others you may want to. So you have here retrieve logs and then frequency. Now, right now it's defaulted every 12 hours. This is it's a great configuration, good for your default, right? But in many cases, especially with larger systems, you may want to set it up to be staggered, right? So in that case, you would set time and do it daily at, say, 12:10, right? So 10 in the morning, or 12:10 in the morning, right after midnight. Then on another group, you may set it at 12:20, and another group at 12:30. And by staggering that, what you do is you enforce that the meters have time to get the retrieval done before the next starts up. And this is especially useful for when you are doing daily energy reporting, right? Otherwise, it may not matter so much. Conversely, if you're looking to pull down data very, very fast, you may want to set up your time at an interval and say every hour, okay? Then the third option is we have a more fancy, complex one called multi-time. And what multi-time does is it allows you to set up a time configuration multiple times, okay? So let's say we had that 12:10 option, right? Hit the add button and daily at 12:10. But let's say you also want to go in and pull data, right, at the end of the day, right? We've had this scenario where some customers, the system, they want the system to do all its retrieval just at nighttime, right? Not during the day, because during the day they have other systems running that they don't want the processing to collide, right? So we set up a pre-retrieval to just kind of speed things up so that when it gets to the midnight retrieval for the energy, it's doing a minimal retrieval so it goes as fast as possible. So we set up our daily at 12:10, or shortly after midnight, and then we set up one late at night, right? Say 10:10, hit add. Now you see that it's going to be retrieving at 2 times. We hit apply multiple times, okay? Now our next option is what logs we want to retrieve, right? Now this lists all of the logs available for all the meters. Because we have a 1450 in here, we can see HIST core, interval 1, interval 2, right? All of them. But let's say we only want HIST 1. We just go in and we uncheck everything. Did I miss anything? Yep. Okay. And now it'll only retrieve from HIST from interval 1, which is our historical 1 log. Now, you may be looking at this and asking, well, I see a Shark 100 in there. How are we going to retrieve interval 1 from a Shark 100? Shark 100s don't have logs. Shark 100 does not have logs. However, it does have software polling. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But we do have a feature that'll allow us to actually pull some basic readings down into a historical log locally, which can then be uploaded to MeterManagerPQA. So now we've configured the retrieve logs on this script, okay? We also have this feature right here, retrieve from meters 1 at a time. This feature is primarily used if you have serial ports. Let's say maybe you have a serial port, all the meters in the group are serial ports, or it's an Ethernet to serial adapter. In those cases, you don't want the retrieval to be done in parallel. Normally, we try to do them in parallel so we can get as much done as possible in as short as time as possible. However, because serial ports, you obviously can't share them, this will allow you to force it to only do one at a time, and that will ensure that you don't have any sort of collisions there. now that we've set up our retrieval, we hit save, go back to the meter list. You see, obviously now it's updated, right? Now it's going to retrieve at 12:10 tonight. But I don't want to wait for that. That's going to take too long, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to manually retrieve logs for this meter. I just start it up, and it just starts retrieving the logs. Now, once it's able to log on to the system and start up its retrieval, we'll be able to take a look, right? And now, in addition to configuring configuring retrieval on a group basis, we can also configure retrieval on a meter basis. So in here, this is right-click configure meter. And we can see here, this is the configuration, all the configuration for the meter itself. All right. You get a bunch of information. This is similar to the device status screen in Communicator, all in one place. We can see the last time it was active. You can add in some meter notes. You can see where the retrieve logs path is. You can configure some other stuff, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then script settings. Now, with script settings here, this is how we configure log retrieval, right? You can see this. You can see a similar setting here. You can enable or disable logs on an individual meter basis. You can select which logs you want to retrieve, and you can set up security. Many meters, you're going to want to turn on security, username, password. With our cyber secure meters, you'll have permissions and roles for different users. And you will select the meter, you'll enter in the password, and then just hit save. Now, this meter doesn't have a password, right? So I'm not going to configure it. But once you configure it, you'll be able to work that. Now, a couple other options we have. A couple other options now that while we're here is archive options. Now, all of these options are available on both group and meter. When you configure it on the group, it applies to all the meters in the group. When you configure it on the meter, it overrides what the group has set and uses it for and uses just the meters configuration. So the first option we have is the archive options. Now, the archive options, what that does is if you exceed a certain size of the database or a certain age of the database, it will automatically take that database and copy it to an archive location. It will then truncate the existing database so that partial retrieval, which is our meter feature, which allows you to continue retrieval where you left off, so that partial retrieval continues just from where that left off. This feature is primarily useful when you have older meters that have log databases that have been running for multiple years. Because what that does is it allows your database to remain relatively small, under 1.5 gigabytes, which helps keep your database healthy. So your data, you don't have any issues with accessing your data. The next option we have is reset. And what this does is this allows you to reset the max min. Now, this is done on a schedule which is configured in the group. Okay, so we're going to hop back over to the group just to take a look at that. Okay. So here we see enable maximum reset, and then we can set when we want to do that. Okay. On the 1st of the month, on the 30th of the month, right? If you want to do it every day, right? You can enable or disable it here. Now the next option is under meter config, we have web port. Now, web port is primarily used by the 1450. The 1450 uses a web port, not Modbus TCP, to do its log retrieval. Now, this by default is port 80. However, if you're doing some sort of port forwarding, this may not be port 80. We have an example. Let me see if this one. Okay, so this one still port 80, right? Sometimes the web port may be 8080 or 5080 or whatever you happen to configure it at. For log retrieval to work, automatic log retrieval to work, you need to go in here and just change that to whatever your web port, your HTTP port is, then hit save. Okay. Now, your next option is time update synchronization. Okay. Actually, we pull up one of our other meters. Let me see. There we go. Perfect. So this is a Shark 200, right? And all of our meters, right, or in software, any meter that has a time clock, we support this time update feature, right? And what that does is the software, Meter Manager, will monitor the time of all the meters, and it will attempt to synchronize that time. It'll attempt to synchronize that time with the PC clock. Now, any meter that has NTP, right, it's better to rely on NTP, right? So any meter that has a network card, you're probably better off using NTP. NTP will be more accurate. It'll be closer. However, for some meters, such as our sub-meters, like the Shark 200S, which don't have NTP, this allows you to keep that clock, up to date. And if it sees the time drift by more than 15 seconds from the PC clock, it will attempt to synchronize that clock. And to do that, all you have to do is enable the time sync. And you can see here, the meter's clock is 4 minutes off the last time it was tested, right? The PC's time zone is -5, which is Eastern Standard Time. You can adjust for a time zone. Now, what this is for is if your meter is in a different time zone from your PC, you're going to want to sync it to the appropriate time zone. So you'll just say, let's say the meter is in, California, right? You see here, we're going to adjust for California's time zone, which is -8. And you see there's a -3 time zone difference. So what it'll do is it'll automatically attempt to synchronize across that difference. Now this is configuring it on an individual meter. You can also configure it here on the group, and that's where you set the time zone for your group, right? because usually with meters, they're all in one location. So this makes it easier just to set it for everyone. Okay, time, security. Okay, so
Luna,
now
let's
that
if I may jump in, we have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Of course, go ahead.
So the first one I have is, when you're looking at the meter list, as you have up right there,
Yes.
what are some of the online statuses show dark blue, some of the online statuses show light blue. What is the difference?
Okay, so as I was saying at the beginning, the color of the status all online is how recently, as in within the last couple minutes, the online status was tested. So we can see here, right, this admin offices, it's blue, right? And if I right click it and do test meter connection, it goes online because we just tested it right now. Similarly, let's say I right click, connect to meter. All right, that brings up communicator. Okay, and you can see the meter was just detected as online. Now, if we sit here for a minute, you'll see the color slowly fade down to a light blue again, just to indicate that the time is starting to pass since it was detected as online. You'll especially see this update automatically when you have the discovery and the online scans configured, right? Now, many people turn these features off, right? Because if you're not connecting meters to the network all the time, you may not need the discovery scan going out and searching for meters. It doesn't do it too often, right? It's like every 4 hours, but it's something that you may want to disable. However, one thing to keep in mind, one of the features, which is the online scan, needs to be turned on for the time synchronization to work, because we use the online scan to check the meter's time to do the time synchronization.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Next question I have, we may need more detail on this, is number of workers settings. What is it doing?
Number workers settings.
Settings. What is it doing?
Number workers settings. There was the manual network scan, number of workers. I'm assuming this is the one we're talking about. Yeah. This is the number of scanning workers. Basically, this is how many IP addresses are scanned simultaneously. When we're doing our discovery scan, it's a very slow scan. And we do this because fast scans, i.e. scanning multiple IP addresses as fast as you can, sometimes can trigger intrusion detection systems, right, on networks, to think that someone is, a hacker is trying to scan your network, okay? So because we're scanning the network, we do it slowly so that we don't cause intrusion detection systems to have a problem. This, however, is intended to be done when you want to, under your conscious decision. So if it does, so it tries to do it as fast as possible. If it does detect something, right? If it does trigger something on your intrusion detection system, you'll see that you'll be able to say to, say, your IT department, hey, I started the scan at this time, right? You know, just so you know, it's not a problem. This was something that we initiated.
Excellent, thank you. Here's a great question. If my meters are in energy PQA, can I change meter group assignments without breaking the energy PQA configuration?
Absolutely. So you'll see here, 1700 James Drive, right? You'll see this little cloud icon with the little green bubble in the center. This indicates that the meter is connected to energy PQA and it's activated. So if we move this meter, manufacturing 7, it's still connected, right? Nothing has changed. Everything will just work. In fact, if you say you configure all your meters for energy PQA, then you move to another server. You decommission the old server, or maybe you want to set up a second server with the meters in there, right? And you, the meter is still registered with energy PQA, but you haven't transferred any licenses or keys or whatever over to the new system. When you connect that meter through the scan or manual connect, right? And you set up energy PQA with your cloud logon in MeterManager, MeterManager will go up to energy PQA, pull down the energy PQA information, and that meter will automatically be connected. You'll see it that it's online, that it's connected, that it's registered, that it's activated. And when the next time it does a retrieval, it will automatically go and push up your data.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so 2 more questions we have. If we select a range of IP addresses, how does MeterManager know if the IP address is assigned to one of our meters? IP addresses can obviously be used for any device other than our meters.
Yes. Okay. So the way that our online scan works is the first thing we do is we do a Modbus TCP connect. Okay. We try a ping, right? If it gets a ping, it then moves to a Modbus TCP connect. If it's not Modbus TCP, if it's not a Modbus TCP device, the connect, it's just not going to connect, right? We know there's something there, but it's not responding on Modbus TCP, so it's not our device. This is what I was referring to earlier with meters that may be set up for alternate ports or port forwarding. You have to manually set those, right? And once you have it set, our online scan, as opposed to the discovery, will be able to use those connections. Because, for example, in our meter list, one of the optional tabs, one of the optional columns is your connection. And you can see here, some of these are not 502, right? Like these two are 511, 524. Okay. The online scan knows this and will use that, but the discovery scan will not. Once we do connect, because there are other devices out there that speak Modbus, once we do connect, the next thing we do is we attempt to identify what the device is by doing very specific Modbus polls. Most of our meters, it's the first 8. It's the first 8 registers. It pulls down the meter identification. It matches that identification against our list of meters. And that is how it determines what the meter type is: Shark 250, 1450, 200, and so on.
Sorry, I was muted. Excellent, thank you. So the last question we have right now is, what are the instances where we would want to turn off the network scan feature? And can you give some examples that you've come across in the past?
Sure. So the primary reason to shut off the discovery service is if you're not plugging meters into the network, right? If you're not, the discovery scan is great if you're just automatically plugging stuff into your network. So, but if you're not, right, then you may not want to have it be doing those scans, right? It is a little bit of extra burden on the system. It's very, very minor. But, you know, if you're trying to cut pennies. The other reason is if, say, you have a lot of meters distributed across a large set of subnets, right? Let's say you have a VPN subsystem going across, you know, multiple networks all over. And we have a couple customers that do this, where the meters are connected either via wireless modems or in multiple locations, and they're not all on one or two subnets. In that case, your IP address range would be so massive that you'd never be able to search it all, right? You'd basically be searching the internet, right? So in that case, the scan, your discovery scan, is not going to be that useful. So that's another example of where you may not want to use it. However, if you have all of your meters just connected on a local network, right, a local subnet, and it's not too large of a local subnet, the discovery scan will do everything you need. Conversely, the online scan, for the most part, there's not really a reason to turn it off. Because the online scan, it will tell you if a meter is online, it will tell you if the meter is offline. It helps keep the time sync up to date, right? It does some other housekeeping on meters. So really the only instance where I've seen that it's useful to shut it off is if you have a lot of meters offline, right? You know that they're offline, right? But you want to keep them in the system. Maybe you have, you know, meters that have been swapped out, right? So the connections are changing, or if you are constantly changing your connections, that's about the only circumstance, because that will just give you, if you have your online scan turned on, it will give you a lot of warnings that you don't really care about, right? Because, oh, hey, this meter went offline. Well, I know it went offline. I just unplugged it, right? Or I know that the wireless connection is flaky for this meter. We've had some customers where their Ethernet connection, their Ethernet infrastructure was kind of shaky. So meters would go online and offline all the time. And they were working on that, they were dealing with it. But while they were doing that, the online scan was not terribly useful. Okay.
Yes, and we have one more question that just came in.
Sure.
Can the scripts be transferred from one computer system to another?
Yes, we do have a procedure for transferring systems, and the upcoming manual for the next release will have that procedure in it. Basically, you just export the database that stores all these settings. You import the database on the new system, and your entire meter manager will be pre-configured the same way it was on the old system.
Great, thank you. If anyone else has any questions, again, please look at the bottom of your screen. You will see a Q&A button. Please click that. You can ask your question in there. Luna, is it possible to maximize your screen here?
This is the best. This is what I got right now.
Perfect. Yep, not a problem. Great, thank you.
Okay, so moving on. So now that we've gotten retrieval set up, or retrieving a meter, I'm just going to quickly stop this script, right, just so that we can see it going. Okay. So we retrieved from this meter, okay? And now that we've retrieved from this meter, we have a whole bunch of things we can do with it, right? You can right-click. The right-click menu gives you access to all of the different features that you can do with a meter. Now, remember I said that Meter Manager provides a fleet dashboard for Communicator, right? There's lots of stuff you can do with Communicator with individual meters, but Meter Manager allows you to do it all in one place, right? Instead of having to remember what your IP address is and manually connect and type in the different addresses, maybe you have a spreadsheet with all the different IP addresses and the passwords and all of it, right? Meter Manager allows you to do it all in one place. Now, for example, let's say if I wanted to do this, if I wanted to connect to this meter through Meter Manager, or through Communicator, I would have to open Communicator, click connect, right? It's pre-configured, but and then I have to go here and 502 and hit connect, wait for it. Once it's connected, now I have to, oh, well, what was my credentials? All right, oh, I don't remember. Right, and then I have to go find my spreadsheet with credentials, right? Hopefully it's not in a spreadsheet. Hopefully it's not one password for all the different meters, right? Now with Meter Manager, I can just hit connect to meter. Communicator comes up. It still takes a little while because Meter Manager or Communicator has to go through the same handshaking. But now we're connected, right? Because we had credentials stored in Meter Manager, now we're in, right? From here, you can access the meter all the exact same. You can go to log status the same way. It pulls up the information. Okay, you can go to polling, right? Okay, we'll go to a different meter, right? You can go to polling, you can go to all the different things, right? In addition, you can also right-click real-time readings and jump straight to the polling screen. It connects, and there, right? You hit OK, and it just closes out. Well, let's say you want to update the firmware on a meter. Right-click, update meter firmware. Right? Let's say you want to reconfigure the meter's profile. Configure meter profile. Show phasers. Right? Now, on a 1450, right? Let's say you want to view the web page. You just hit view web page. And here we are at mynexusmeter.com, right? So it allows you to jump to all of these from one location, right? You can manage them all, you can do it all, right? Now, additionally, you can view meter logs, no longer going into open logs, finding the file, doing all of that work. You just view meter logs. It automatically opens log viewer, same meter, and you can pop it in. And you can see the meter log data that was retrieved just recently. Now this meter's clock is slightly in the future, so the time is a little, oh, sorry, that was from yesterday, right? Because this retrieves at 12:30 every day, right? So that was the last time it retrieved. So it's up to date. We see our data right there, right? But not only that, Meter Manager also integrates in reverse. So once you're actually in Log Viewer, right, you can always just close this file or minimize it to open a second meter, right? So we could like jump over here, view meter logs, right? And now you can see them simultaneously. Or you can go to meter 1 and look at that. We have all of our meters in here. But you'll also notice in manufacturing 7, we had 2 meters, right? We had 2 meters. We had the Shark 100. It's not in there. And that's because we don't have any logs for it yet, right? And you just select the meter you want. Open log file. Oops, sorry. Open meter log. Done, right? Or you still have the ability, open log file, to go the old route of selecting by file. Okay, now that you've retrieved those logs, we can now use those logs for things, right? The software will automatically generate all of your export files if you've configured ComTrade, PQDiff, HHF in Communicator. Then MeterManager, when it automatically retrieves, it'll generate those files. And the next feature you can do, in addition, is you can also, let's see, where did 17? There it is. Okay, you can also use Report Exporter. Now, Report Exporter is the report generation package that we have with MeterManager. Report generation, Report Exporter allows you to generate a monthly, weekly, daily, or even hourly report for any number of readings that you have in a meter or for an entire group. So we're going to just do a basic daily for watt hours received. And we're going to, let's see, next report period starts. Oops. We're going to configure this to be 2 days ago. Okay. You can configure a name. You can also create a computed channel. Oops. And if you right click, you can configure it, give it a name. And we'll call this hourly sum, formula sum 60, right? And what this will do is this will do a sum of those individual periods for those individual intervals over the course of an hour. So now we have that, we save it. And you can go over to preview. And we see here, this is the actual live data. All right. And it's summed the individual intervals every hour. And from here, you can also configure formulas, okay, row formulas and column formulas. And we're not going to get into too many details there, but you can configure those. And once you've configured this report, you now see this little report icon next to the meter. That indicates that there's a report configured for this meter. You can also right-click Report Exporter on an entire group, which allows you to configure a report that generates a report for all the meters in that group. And then it will automatically, and under the Report Exporter script, automatically generate all of your reports. Now I configured it to be to start like 2 days ago, right? So we should get one report for the 22nd to the 23rd. Okay. Any questions on Report Exporter?
Again, if you do have a question, you can see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. feel free to click on that and ask your question, but we do have no questions at the moment.
Okay, so the next feature, is energy PQA. So communicator, meter manager, energy PQA is a tiered system. Communicator allows you to interact and configure one meter. Meter manager collects your data for a fleet of meters, keeps track of its status online. But when you want to really see what's going on with your energy usage, with your data, if you want comprehensive what's going on with your facilities and what trends your energy might have, you're going to want to go to Energy PQA. With Energy PQA, with Meter Manager, all you have to do to integrate with Energy PQA is create an account with Energy PQA and then put that account information in to Meter Manager. And there's a couple ways for you to do that. The first way is from Communicator. This is your standard license activation procedure. Because if you go to Help, Software License, select Energy PQA and log in, it'll allow you to enter that information. Now this system is already connected. If you're not configured, when you go to Energy PQA, right, it'll give you a login screen. And then your third option is Tools, Configure, System, Energy PQA options. And you can see here that you can turn on Energy PQA integration, put in a user, put in a password, and you get to see all the fancy, tech configurations here. Right? Don't worry, these are all locked out, right? But you're not getting anything fancy here. This just turns on debugging. Then once you're logged in, all of your meters will show up on this Energy PQA button, right? And it'll give you the group, right? You can see here manufacturing, right? It gives you the name of the meter, its status, right? It gives you the cloud expiration. So you can see all of the expiration of all of your meters at this location, right? We can see one of the meters is expired, right? And then we can see the 2 meters that we just added are not registered, right? Now, to register a meter, it's as simple as, once you've logged in with Meter Manager, all you have to do is go over to this location, click Register Meter, you select the meter, and update registration. That's it. Now, I'm not going to do it because these meters have already been registered to other customers, right? So, but when you do that, it'll register the meter and the logs will just automatically start uploading. If you haven't retrieved the logs for the meter yet, it'll prompt you to do so. And when it's done retrieving, it will automatically upload those logs. That's it, right? You may want to access your data. You just need to call Electro Industries to have your, to purchase an activation on those meters. And all of your data will be available and you'll be able to use it right away. Any questions on Energy PQA integration?
No, but we do have a couple of report exporter questions if we could touch on those now.
No problem.
So the first question is, does report exporter push data to other systems?
Report exporter does 2 things. The first one is that it saves the file to this path, okay? You can see here, right? Retrieve logs, report exporter, You can configure this to be any location you want, okay? Once you've configured it, it will save the file to that location. The second thing you can do is set up email FTP, okay? If you set up email, it will, every time it generates a report, it'll automatically put together an email, attach the report Excel file or CSV to that email and send it off. So if you have an automated email processor, you can do it that way. Your second option is to upload it to an FTP server. This is not SFTP, so if you're going to use it, I suggest use the integration. I suggest using the email because we do support SSL on the email. But you know, if you have an internal server, right, an internal FTP server, you could set it up to work that way. Okay.
Great, thank you. And the next question is, and there's a couple of questions about this involved with this one. How does Report Exporter handle zeros for power outages? And how does it flag events, time sets, etc.? And then lastly, how does it pad the POs, I believe power outages, with zeros?
So power outages, okay. So Report Exporter uses meter logs, right? It just uses the meter logs. So it's reporting what intervals are available from the meter. If you have a minute interval log, you're gonna get line items for each minute. If you have 15 minutes, you're gonna get intervals for every 15 minutes. If you have your meter configured to only record once an hour, you're only going to get once an hour timestamps. Now, this is important to note because if you have two channels, one at a 5-minute interval, one at a 15-minute interval, you will get a timestamp for every 5 minutes and a 15-minute skipping over items because it's only on the 15-minute. And you can see that simulated here with our hourly sum. This is what it will look like, right? So you got your hourly, you got your 15-minute interval, and then you got your blank cells for the entries that don't have any value. This is the exact same thing that will happen for power outages, okay? During a power outage, if you say, let's say you're doing a group and you have 2 meters, 1 meter was online, 1 meter was offline. The meter that was offline for that period will have a bunch of blanks. The meter that was online will have some values. However, if both meters are offline, or this is a meter report, it will actually just skip over that interval, right? It'll say 12:15, 2 a.m. Because all it's doing is it's reporting the data that the meter itself has. Now, this is important to note that when we're talking about this, we're talking about power outages, which was the original question. With communications outages, you will not see this. Because with a communication outage, the meter is continuing to record. And when the meter comes back online, the data is now available and it will retrieve that data, it'll be included in the report, and you won't see any gaps. Related to that was the third question is how do we deal with zero padding? We don't. There's no zero padding in Report Exporter. It just puts in blank cells or no lines for a timestamp. So with Report Exporter, if you're doing automatic processing on it, it's important for your processor to look at the timestamp. It's there for a reason. And then cross-reference that with the value. Okay?
Yes, great, thank you. And that's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay. So we generated our Energy Reporter report. We uploaded our data to MeterManagerPQA. And in fact, we can now view that data in MeterManagerPQA, right? Now, this meter, this is 1700. We've configured it for MeterManagerPQA. We can see it's enabled. We can see the range of data here. This is under Meter Config, Energy PQA tab. We can see what items we have available. We're not recording this, so it says not configured. We can see the range, all right, of what has been uploaded. We can see here the range that Energy PQA has stored for this meter, right? We've been uploading data for quite some time for this meter. The status is up to date, right? System events, we have some new data pending, because if you're retrieving logs, you always have, with system events, there's usually going to be something new, right? And you can hit view in cloud. It comes over. Now, we may not have external access, internet access set up on this system, so the website might not be popping up, but it'll pop up and it'll jump straight to the dashboard for that meter. Okay. So now that we've gone through that, now let's start playing with some of the really advanced features. The first one I want to show you is meter discovery. This is going back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. So meter discovery under tools, configure system meter discovery. Now, before we were just scanning a generic range, right? But let's say you have a kind of a fancy range. You have like 3 different subnets and they're scattered all over the place. One of the things you can do is manually configure the discovery address. And you can start adding in either a mask, right, or a range, and say 172, 20, 166, 1, 172, 20, 166, 10. Then we add another one, range, 172, 20, 166, 30, 40, right? So we're skipping over 10 to 20, right? It will only now scan those specific ranges, right? But let's say in the middle of that range, we previously had a question about how does it detect our meters versus other meters versus computers, say, versus routers. It will try to connect, and that does take some time, right? Especially for things that allow connections but aren't responding on Modbus, right? If you know that some things like that is there, we also have a scan blacklist. And what that does is that says, well, I happen to know that this meter, this IP address is never going to respond properly. So I just add it to the blacklist and it will automatically skip over that. I'll say, nope, nope, that's no good, right? I'm not going to even try to do that. Okay. Here we also have our enable scan. Here's also where you can configure your check, how often you do it, right? Like you can see the discovery scan is done every 4 hours. Your online scan is done every 10 minutes. We have some scan setting overrides. This is what I was talking about earlier with how long we wait between discovery scans. Usually it's best not to touch these. Okay. Now, the next feature is our Shark 200. Shark 100 pollard. Now, this supports Shark 100 and Shark 50 meters. Okay. And what this does is every 15 minutes, the software will automatically go out and pull the Shark 100 real-time readings and store it in a database. Now, we just set this up, right? This is a Shark 100, right? But you'll notice the view meter logs is turned on, right? This meter doesn't have any logs, but this one does. And that's because we have been doing a software polling. We can go open it in Log Viewer. Okay, you can see these are all the real-time readings, right? Now, one thing to note: the Shark 100 does not have interval watt hours. Okay, it does not have interval watt hours. However, it does have watt hours received. The Shark 100 is supported in MeterManagerPQA. MeterManagerPQA uses the interval watt hours. These interval watt hours are software computed, all right? Just something to be aware of. But if we pull our values over, we can see we've been playing with this for the last hour or so, and we have an hour worth of values, right? Isn't that cool? And you can see the interval values that have been computed, which is the difference of these two, right? So that one's that, those are that, and so on. You only get historical because that's what it has, but okay. Next is configuring some of the more advanced retrieval options. So under system options, some computers and some systems and setups can be a little overloaded. If you have a lot of meters, if you have maybe you're using your meter manager on a server that may be doing other things simultaneously, you're using less than the recommended resources, which we don't recommend, you can go and configure the system to work a little slower. This will allow you to retrieve on limited systems or on systems where you have a lot of collisions. The first one is the max concurrent downloads. Okay. The max concurrent downloads, normally we try to retrieve from 10 meters simultaneously. However, this can, for systems which don't have like 16 gigs of RAM, dedicated 32 gigs of RAM, lots of hard drive space, this can be a little bit of a load, especially when you're dealing with the more powerful meters like the 1500 and the 1450. When that's the case, you can drop this down to 1 or 2, okay? And that will limit the number of meters that it retrieves from simultaneously. It will significantly slow down your retrieval, but it can help. The next configuration is under log retrieval. You have 3 options in here. The first one is a log retrieval limit to all retrievals. Now, normally when you configure 10 simultaneous retrievals, that's per group. Okay, that's per group for some meters, and it shares it across for other retrievals. When you turn this on, it forces all the retrievals, no matter what, to be limited to that 10 maximum. Okay. The next is split log retrievals into sub-processes. Now, you really only need this for the 1450. The 1450 can have very, very large logs. And because of that, if you're retrieving from, say, 10 1450s simultaneously, and you have like 200 1450s, and every single one of them is generating multiple waveforms every single day, what this can do is this can cause MeterManager to use up so many resources that it starts having problems with retrieving. when this occurs, right? When this occurs, you can enable this. And what this does is this splits everything out so that all the resources are managed individually. This is not a normal thing that needs to be turned on. We only have one customer where we've ever had to use this. However, if you find that you're having problems with retrieval, this is a feature that can help. The next retrieval configuration is putting your retrieval in another location. Now, most people are familiar with the retrieve logs path from Communicator. We no longer manage the retrieve logs path from Communicator itself. We now manage it from MeterManager, and this is because MeterManager allows you to actually configure it across all your users. When you configure it here, let's say you have a second hard drive you want to store your retrieve logs on because you don't want it to be on your system drive. Or maybe you have it set to a network path with a map drive or something. You can go in here and just change it to retrieved, right? And when you hit save, it will automatically save it and reconfigure it to your new path. Note, it will not move existing log databases. So if you want to do it and you've already set up your system and you've already started retrieving, you may want to manually copy those files over or move them over. We also have the map drive feature, which allows you to set up a map drive. You just select the drive you want. Right? You enter the directory you want. You put in the username and the password to connect to that path, and you hit map drive. And it will attempt to map the drive. I don't have a network path here, so I'm not going to set that up, but that's how you go through it. Then, okay, so that's handling retrieval. There's a couple other useful little tools in here. This is where you can manually enable or disable automatic retrieval. If for whatever reason you want to just shut off automatic retrieval for all of the locations, right? Say you're doing some service or something like that, and you don't want to manually shut it off for each group, you can just go in here, disable it, and when you hit save, it'll just shut it off, right? Until you come back and turn it back on. We also have delete old scripts. This cleans up retrieve logs. This is also where you configure your maximum allowed time drift, okay, for your time sync. And one last feature is this one right here, retry retrieve logs, okay? This is especially useful for Shark 200s, Shark 200s, MP 200s, when you have a meter connection failure, right? Or someone else is retrieving from the meter and you were unable to retrieve from the meter, right? Your schedule, right? It's going to wait until the next time you download to automatically retrieve from your meter. This is fine. The meter stores those logs, and you're not going to lose any data. But if you are generating reports off these logs, your reports are going to have to wait because it's going to wait until the next retrieval interval. If that's the case, you can turn this feature on. And what it does is after a retrieval failure, say it wasn't able to connect to the meter, the software will automatically detect the reason for why it failed. And then after 30 minutes, it will say, okay, let me go in and let me try retrieving automatically from that again. And in most cases, it'll work, right? Especially if it was a transient connection failure, maybe the network was busy or something. And if that fails, it'll then try again. and then it'll try it again 30 minutes later. And it stops after 3 times, right? Because you don't want to keep trying when it's permanently offline. Okay, so that's the advanced settings. Any questions on the advanced settings so far?
Yes, we have one question that just came in. Can you set up as path only UNC without selecting mapped drive letter?
No. So internally, we are using the map drive feature to put in the credentials. Windows security doesn't allow for automatically putting in credentials for a UNC path. They want it to be an interactive process. So we tie into the map drive feature to do that.
Great, thank you. And that's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay. So another feature we have is meter issues. Now, we were talking about fleet management, right? Meter issues allows you to see if there's any problems with the connections of your meters. And by connections, we're talking the wiring, right? Say your voltage is miswired, or your CTs are miswired, right? Meter issues allows you to scan for that and report that. Now, this is a manual process, right? Because you don't want to be nagged all the time by the same issue. But all you have to do is right-click a meter, go to Test Meter Issues. You see it's testing it, and it says 0 problems detected. It's all working. If we did have a problem, you'd see the issue reported here. You can hit Scan All. I'm not going to do that because it processes and takes a while. And you would also see here a little exclamation saying, hey, you got a problem, right? Maybe your CTs are wired backwards. And if you know that that's not the case, you can just go in to Meter Issues, right-click, and Clear Issue, right? And it will stop bugging you about that until you test it again. Okay. So next, what do you do when things don't work? When sometimes, right, say your retrieval, say you're waiting for a report, or you're waiting for your logs, and it's just not showing up. You don't know why. The first thing you can do is go into the script status. Now, this gives information about all the different scripts that have run in MeterManager. You can see a lot of them up here. We can see our energy reporter integration. We can see our time sync, the report exporter generation. Like we can see here, report exporter last ran at 11. If we double click it, we can now view the list of actions, go to raw events, and you can see here, it was going through and it generated some reports, right? Now, it's saying here that, it generated the report from the 22nd to the 23rd. It then tried to generate the 23rd to the 24th, right? And it said, well, I don't have all the data for the 23rd, right? So I'm just going to stop right here. And that's it. But let's say you're having an issue with retrieval, right? You can, well, if Energy PQA, this is our standard group. We go over here. It'll load up all of the events, and we can see it took about 17 minutes to retrieve from all the meters, right? But we have no errors. Go to raw events, right? And this is very technical, right? But it gives you an overview of everything that's going on with the meter, right? But we also see this one meter, this one group where we have it's red and we have this little exclamation mark. Let's go take a look. okay? Well, we can see here that TCP2, right? This is a random meter that happens to be offline. It's reporting that it doesn't know how to interact with this meter. It doesn't know how to interact with this log. Well, it turns out that's because this is actually a Shark 250. If we go over to the meter, however, it says that it's a 1450. Well, the reason is because actually in the system, let's see, this is 21, right? It's actually this meter. So when it tried to retrieve from this meter, right, the meter, the IP address obviously had been reconfigured, right? This is the actual meter at that IP address, which means that this system, this meter is just sitting in here. It's a misconfigured meter. We don't want to retrieve from it, right? That's why I have it in the not working group. So now we know, oh, hey, the IP address was reassigned. Maybe that was intentional, maybe it's not. But now we can take a look at it and say, nope, we don't want to deal with it. And now we can remove meter from system. Okay, we do that, bunk. And now the meter is gone. We no longer have to deal with that meter. But you'll also notice that the meter manager automatically detected that the IP address was reassigned and the new meter was automatically put into the system. Now, similarly, let's say retrieval failed because you couldn't connect to the meter, right? In here, again, you would see an entry that said unable to connect to meter. Maybe meter is offline, maybe you get a TCP error. And those are great indicators to go and check your meter connection, right? Maybe the wire fell out, maybe the router is having issues, maybe it's a Wi-Fi meter and it needs to be serviced, maybe the meter is offline, right? But they give you leads into where to go next. Lastly, if all else fails, once you've done that, we have this button right here, export log. If you know there's been an issue, right? If you know there's been an issue, but you can't figure it out, right? We're here to help. If you collect this log, you just export it. And we have this file right here, and this will allow us to analyze it in greater detail because we know what these codes mean. Okay, so
Luna, we do have two questions if I can jump in.
absolutely.
The first question is, can you send an email reporting a meter or meters have been offline for a certain period of time? And also, can you send an email if a retrieve has failed?
Yes and yes. However, I'm going to qualify the first one. We cannot send an email when a meter has been offline for a period of time. However, we can send an email when the meter is detected as offline. So this is not a very useful feature for when you know a meter is going on and offline constantly. However, if a meter goes offline and you want to know about it right away or relatively right away, because I think it generates that information like once a day, you can set that up by configure system email reporting. Okay, you set up your email options here, your host, your port, your username, your password. It has SSL, your from address, your to address, and then you do here, enable email reporting when meters go offline. Once the meter is offline, it will it'll send off that. And apparently, okay, so yeah, we do have that feature. That's cool. Yeah. So we do have the feature for when it goes offline for a period of time. So if a meter is bouncing on and off, you just select this, and then you select this, and you specify after an hour, right? It'll say, hey, these meters have been offline. If they stay offline, it will not continue to notify you, right? However, if it comes back online and then goes offline again, it will. Okay. We also have two other enable email reporting of script errors. So this is going to be your retrieval failures, right? But keep in mind, it will report on all the script errors. So if you have an issue with, say, report exporter, energy reporter, energy PQA, any of those, it'll report on those too. So if you just want your retrieval, you may get some extra notifications. However, it does try to group your emails, group all the issues, so you don't receive 700 emails, in a couple minutes.
Excellent, thank you. The next question I have, let's see, I think we may need more detail on this. Does the meter issues automatically run for newly added meters?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so meter issues, as I mentioned, is a manual process. Okay, it only runs when you tell it to run. So we have the scan all, which will just go through all the meters over your entire system. However, I also showed you right-click test, right? You can also do that, right-click test meter issues on a group. So if you want to do that, right, your best option is just to, when you configure the system, right, either do it on individual groups, right? For new meters, if you only have one new meter, go into the one new meter, right-click test it, right? In general, you don't need to retest meters that have been working for 6 months. If the CTs are wired backwards, they're wired backwards, right? They're not gonna unwire themselves. So you really only need it when you're first setting up the system, but it will scan all of those meters for you. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. The last question I have here is there a list of errors, and does it show the potential actions that can be taken?
List of what errors?
I'm assuming list of errors that can be found with meter connections,
Okay.
sending data.
So
and again, if whoever's asking this, if you want to send over further detail, please do so.
So if we're talking about meter issues, with meter issues, it provides as much information as it can, right? So, for example, if the CT wiring is wrong, it will say that the phases are out of sequence, right? And it'll suggest rewiring the system, and it'll give details on why it thinks the CTs are out of sequence. If it thinks that maybe one of the currents isn't not the currents, if one of the voltages is not hooked up correctly, because we do detect low voltage, it will say, hey, your voltage C is too low, right? You might want to check the connection on that. If a meter is offline, it will say the meter is offline. It's not able to get into the kind of detail that a technician would be able to, because when a meter goes offline, we can't tell why it's offline, right? We just know that the meter is not responding. Similarly, with wiring, it can detect that the CTs are out of sequence, but it can't tell why, right? It can't tell if the voltage is low. It can't tell it's because the wire is loose versus, the entire system is a little low, right? But it can tell you what the meter sees. And if the meter sees out of sequence or low voltage or strange phase angles, right, it'll do its best to inform you that. And it does handle Y versus delta. So it does do the processing a little bit different for the two.
And what if there's download failures?
If there is what?
Download failures.
Retrieval failures.
Retrieval
failures, yeah. Retrieval failures show up under script status. Okay, that's what we were seeing here, right? Retrieval failures will show up under script status. You investigate and it will say connection to IP address 1.2.3.4 failed, meter offline. Or maybe it'll say retries exceeded, right? It tried to connect, it was able to connect. Maybe it tried to connect, it connected successfully, but it was unable to engage the log, right? This happens with old Shark 200s. You know, usually the solution there is you update the meter firmware, right? You update the meter firmware and the connection. Conversely, the retries exceeded could be just that someone else is retrieving, right? It'll tell you retries exceeded, someone else may be retrieving, right? If you come back later, this is where our automatic retry comes in handy. It'll then automatically handle that. Okay.
Great, thank you. And the attendee did just mention they were referring to script errors.
Okay, yeah. So with the retrieval errors, it does the best it can to give you more information, but in some cases it's not something that we can determine directly.
Thank you. And we do have one more question. Does MeterManager generate automatic reports indicating you have successfully communicated and retrieved data from the meters daily?
No.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions we have at the moment. Again, if you do have a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Oh, and a question just popped up, sorry. Is it possible to give a real-time alarm once a meter captured a power quality event, sag, etc.?
We do not have that. We do not have that feature. Yeah, we do not have that feature at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That is a feature we do have on MeterManagerPQA, correct?
That is, yes, that is correct.
Yep, that would be the email on the alarm feature that we have.
Yep. So if that is something that is desired, whether it's PQ limits, then all you need to do is hook up your meter to MeterManagerPQA, enable your email reporting from there, and MeterManager will automatically upload after every download. MeterManagerPQA will detect your new PQ event and you will get a notification of that.
Excellent, thank you. And that's all the questions we have at the moment.